What's your biggest, this isn't what it looks like moment? I used to take my kids to different playgrounds as they were growing up. Oftentimes, I'd be out there with them, chasing them, being the random monster, dragon, antagonist, while they run away and then eventually turn around and chase me back. Inevitably, since the rest of the parents were on their iPhones or doing anything but interacting with their kids, I'd end up with a collection who wanted to join in the fun. It was all going well until they said they wanted to play Minecraft. So, as a group of kids suddenly scatter from where I'm standing, yelling, "Ah! Run away from the creeper! Ah!" I look up to see a line of parents suddenly jostled back into consciousness with absolutely no frickin' context whatsoever. So, first story, and I believe this is probably going to be a sticking point throughout, but most of these stories are probably going to have something to do with incidental contact with children. Just a feeling. Story 2. One time during my teens, I was using my grandparents' computer to look up video game cheat codes. I was worried they might disapprove that I was using cheats, so when my grandfather walked into the room, I quickly minimized the window and turned around to say hello and ask what he needed. His response, "Oh, nothing important. I'll just come back later." He almost seemed to be rushing out. I turned back to the computer screen in confusion to see that minimizing the window had revealed a not safe for work pop-up ad hiding in the background. I was super embarrassed. He never mentioned it though. Story 3. More of a this isn't what it sounds like. A family we were close to had just moved to the US from India. They had a young daughter, 5 years old, who was still learning English. One day she fell down the stairs while playing outside. She ran in crying and saying, "The stairs hit me!" Once she calmed down, her dad corrected her and said, No, you mean to say I fell down the stairs." A few days later, my dad was showing them the grocery store. In the checkout line, the cashier saw the girl's bruised up legs and asked what happened. The daughter responded with, "What did you tell me to say, Dad?" "Oh, right, I fell down the stairs." He had a fun time explaining that to the police. Story 4. I was 16 and my parents had just left the house for a dinner out. I had to do laundry, so I start right after they left the door to get it done as early as possible. As I'm filling the machine, I notice a stain on my shirt, and so I put it with the rest of the clothes. I also look at my pants and decide to add them as well, along with my socks and, F it, my underwear as well. So I'm butt naked and I start the machine. I rush to the stairs to get to my room and dress up, and that's when the front door, which is right where the stairs are, opens and I freeze. My dad comes in and sees me naked. We both aren't moving for a few seconds, and then he laughs, grabs his wallet on the table and says, "So that's what you're doing while we aren't here." And he then closes the door while giggling. I'm still there in shock and red as a beet. I rush to dress and call my parents on my mother's cell phone and tell them it's not what they think, as they're just laughing their asses off. Story 5. I used to work security/reception at my company, so I greeted everyone when they came in the door and made sure they were wearing their security badge. You could either wear your badge on a lanyard around your neck or on a retractable belt clip. So I've been doing this job for 2 years when I'm outside talking to some of the girls that work on the second floor. One of them just flat out asks why I always check out women when they come in to visit. Excuse me? Turns out there was a lot of talk about how I was looking women up and down when they came through the door. Well, I was looking everyone up and down. I would look at their chest first, and if there was no badge there, my eyes would move to their belt. It was kind of my job and stuff. Story 6. I'll preface this by saying a couple of weeks prior to this, my wife had bought some frilly underwear on clearance sale and a couple of bananas to eat on the way to work. I was chilling in the car at the store while she went in, and I smelled nasty, overripe bananas. I reached into the back seat and pulled out the bag that had been forgotten back there. I take the underwear out of the bag and tie the old banana up dog poo style. No big deal, right? For whatever reason, my brain goes, I wonder if these brand new underwear now reek of old squishy banana. And I put them to my nose to take a big whiff right as a sweet old lady pulls into the parking spot in front of our car. She looks at me, panties pressed into my nose and inhaling deeply. Her eyes go wide with shock, and visibly shaking, she pulls back out of the spot and drives away. Literally leaves. Shopping trip canceled. I know I had to look like some kind of degenerate pervert on a public minge binge, but it wasn't what it looked like. Story 7. I went to my friend's house last night. Edit, not actually last night. I told this story before on Reddit and copy and pasted it without changing the time frame, and came back around 12:30 a.m. To set some context, my friend lives about an hour away from me on the opposite side of the city. When I was driving back home afterwards, this car cut me off on the ramp and I honked at them. I then turned back up the music and pretty much drove home on autopilot, but when I got off the freeway at my exit, I realized that the same car that cut me off was in front of me. After that, I got kinda curious because it had been about 30 minutes since the incident, and we'd changed freeways twice already. I then got a little bit worried that they'd think I was following them home, but I didn't think too much of it, until the car started going up the same streets I did. Eventually, I realized that my 16-year-old neighbor, who just learned how to drive, cut me off, and she and her friends were probably now terrified that some lunatic was following them home. I guess she called her parents in the meantime because she pulled into her driveway and the house lights were all lit up, and her dad, a huge guy, was standing outside with a baseball bat. I then pulled into my own garage and apologized for scaring them, and it was all chill after that. Story 8. My boyfriend and I had a fight and both went to bed grumpily. We were housemates and had separate bedrooms. In the middle of the night, I heard a loud thump in the living room area of the house. I grabbed my baseball bat and went through the whole house with the bat, and the lights on. Every closet, every cupboard, etc. Nothing was out of order and the doors were locked. I was still spooked and running high on adrenaline. It was about 4:30 in the morning and I had to get up at 6, so I just gave up on going back to sleep before that. I debated what to do for the hour and a half and decided to go to IHOP, open 24 hours where I live. As I was about to leave, I realized that if I left my sleeping boyfriend in the house and the murderer was actually still there and killed him, I would feel extremely guilty. So I went to wake him up just enough to warn him before I left for IHOP. He woke up to me leaning over his bed, holding a bat and whispering about murder. He almost cried. Story 9. Alright, as a student, when I visited my hometown, I got to visit my grandma before leaving back to university, and grandma always had small chocolates for people visiting her. Her grandchildren would get more than one usually. As I was leaving the house, she gave me one more to have during the travel back home. I ate a piece of chocolate while loading my stuff in the car, and I put the small chocolate in my back pocket, right before I say goodbye to my parents. It was a hot day at the end of summer. A bit before the exit to the highway I was taking, I stopped at a traffic light and realized that the chocolate between my butt and the car seat was not a good idea, so I'm reaching for it. Chocolate already melted and package already open made my left hand full of melted chocolate. Following the loud, "well, crap," I realized that the girl in the car next to me just saw a guy reaching his butt and bringing up his hand again full of a brown, unknown sticky thing. The look on her face was totally worth it. Only bad thing is that melted chocolate won't go away, only with tissues. Story 10. Not me, but a kid I worked with. He comes into the break room holding some sandwiches and a Dr. Pepper, sits down and starts eating, and then tries to have a drink, but he can't open it. I offer to twist the lid off, but no, he can do it, he says. So he puts his Dr. Pepper between his legs, grabs the lid with both hands and twists. This obviously wasn't a bright idea. It explodes over his lap, making him look like he's pissed himself. So he goes to the bathroom to clean up, gets some loo roll and starts mopping up, but it still looks really bad. Over by the radiator is a hand dryer, so in his infinite wisdom, he puts one foot on top of the radiator and then angles his crotch to the hand dryer and starts rubbing furiously as the hand dryer's going. Unluckily for him, he's facing away from the door, so when the next guy walks in, all he can see is this skinny dude rubbing his crotch like no tomorrow while waving it under the hand dryer. Apparently, the guy just walked right on back out after muttering a sorry. He didn't find it funny when I pointed out the Dr. Pepper motto was, "What's the worst that can happen?" Story 11. My best friend of 15 years, Jay, is a guy, and me being a girl, we've always endured people assuming we had to have had sex. Spoiler, we don't. Anyways, we're camping with a few friends and got completely drunk. One of my girlfriends, M, has taken off into the woods after a fight with her boyfriend, and the four of us are trying to find her. At this point, I'm so full of tequila I know I'm about to puke, so I ask my best friend to hold my hair back. We're in complete darkness. I'm on all fours puking. He's awkwardly standing in front of me, kinda crouched down because he's a foot taller than me, and holding all my hair up while I heave. It looked... I know how it looked, but on my life I was getting sick. At this moment, M runs out of the woods, flashlight directly on us and screams, "Holy crap, she's blowing him!" I'm legit puking so hard I don't even hear her. By the time we got back to the campfire, M had told everyone else what she saw. She's still adamant to this day that she knows what she saw. Edit. Wow, everyone got the wrong idea of M completely. She's really not a female dog. Dramatic, oh god, yes, but a female dog, no. We had a metric F ton of tequila that night. No one was thinking rationally. As for Jay, he's not in the friend zone, you effing sad dads. It's possible to love someone, enjoy their company and emotional support, without wanting or needing to put your genitalia into their assorted body cavities. Story 12. Before mobile telephony, 1992, I was a soldier in Germany, stationed in a university city. I had a German girlfriend. I was away training at Graf and had spoken with her on the phone, and she said she was going to the disco that night with a friend. As luck had it, I was offered a chance to go back home early. There was no way to contact her. She wasn't at home, and that's how it was back then. So I figured I'd go down to the disco and try and find her. When I got there, she was dancing with some guy I knew to be a cook in our unit. I watched long enough to see that they were just dancing, nothing going on, and then decided to just let her be and walk down to a nearby pub, had a beer, and came back when I knew the disco was closing. Well, as I stood outside the building, the cook she was dancing with came out with his buddy, and they almost immediately managed to get into a fight with a group of Turks who were hanging out in the parking lot. One of them broke a bottle on the cook's head and ground the glass into his scalp. I broke the fight up and separated the two belligerents. Then I took the cook by the head so I could examine his wounds, which were bleeding like a female dog. About this time, my girlfriend came out of the disco with her friend and saw me holding the guy, blood all over his face and on my hands. She ran up screaming at me that I couldn't just F somebody up for dancing with her. Well, first of all, let's just hope that the cook is okay in this situation, but that's actually kind of badass. You know, it's like, I can only imagine what the girlfriend's thinking. She walks out, dude that she just danced with is just all busted up and bloodied, and, you know, your significant others are like, yeah, don't you dare dance with my girlfriend again. Story 13. My friend and I got super high in high school and were laying on the floor of my computer room listening to I Feel Like Dying by Lil Wayne. When I say super high, I meant it felt comparable to a mild trip from when I eventually did acid and shrooms in later years. We hear the garage door start to go up and go into an all-out panic. There would be no way to fool anyone that we weren't high. We come up with the brilliant idea to take off our uniform pants, Catholic school, and jump into my bunk beds and pretend we're sleeping. My mom makes her way upstairs and casually opens the door. I immediately dart up and say, "Hi, Mom, we're just taking a nap." She smiles, nods, and closes the door. Years later, I find out that my mom thought we were experimenting with each other, not drugs. She apparently called my uncle, who's gay, immediately after leaving the room and asked if he thought I was gay. Pretty funny stuff that my family brings up repeatedly to this day. Once I told my mom we were high, it made a lot more sense to her. Story 16. After I got my license, I used to just go out for random drives in the middle of the night to enjoy my freedom because the repetitive grind of adulthood had not yet crushed my enthusiasm for life. I was cruising through a really nice community around 2 a.m. when suddenly a cop comes from out of nowhere and pulls me over. He asks what I'm doing and I tell him I'm just out for a drive. He informs me that there's been a rash of car stereo thefts in the area. Now, earlier that same day, a friend had given me a very nice car stereo, amp, and CD change that I was planning to install, so they were all piled in my back seat, wires hanging all over the place, along with the tools I had borrowed from my dad to do the job. Of course, he spies all of this through the rear window with his flashlight and questions me. I nervously gave him my explanation, and he went back to his cruiser for a bit, then came back and let me off with a smile. I'm assuming that once he pulled up my record and saw I was 16 years old with no previous infractions, he assumed my story was true, or I was an extremely professional and ambitious car stereo thief. Thankfully, it was the former. Story 17. A coworker that I ran into at a wedding got really drunk and tried to recruit me into helping him kill his ex-girlfriend and her new beau, who were also coworkers of mine. His whole plan was for me to inquire the next day at work whether they would be at a party later in the week and to text him if they were so he could ambush them when they tried to leave. Dude went into creepy detail about how he was going to shoot them in the knees first so they'd have to beg for their lives from the ground. I played along like, sure, whatever man, and gave him some space. The next day at work, I reported the incident to HR and called the police. I work for a Fortune 100 company, so our corporate security called me at my desk and asked me to go into a private room with my cell and call them back so we could discuss to help them assess the threat level to the office. There was only one private room in that office, a long conference room with big windows and a long table. The lights were out, but the windows provided plenty of light. I noticed an open laptop on the conference table, but it wasn't on, and since the lights were out, I didn't think much of it. I was on the phone with corporate security for maybe 10 minutes, and the department head, this super butch woman who looks and acts like Jane Lynch, walks in with the head of an even larger department. They had been using the room for a meeting and had stepped away to do something, and they both walked in to find me huddled in the corner on my cell phone with the lights out instead of at my desk taking phone calls. She had always hated me, so I knew it was pointless, but I managed to get out, "Sorry, I'm on the phone with corporate security," and she barked, "I don't care. Leave!" Never got an apology or anything, even after the dude was fired, and it seemed to only increase her hatred for me. No good deed goes unpunished, I guess. Story 18. Not what it looks like, but rather a not what it sounds like. My mom was physically disabled, severe rheumatoid arthritis in her whole body. She was an excellent mom and fought through pain I can't comprehend every day to get my brother and me to school, and in general have a normal life. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked. Growing up like that, you initially don't know that anything you have is unusual because it's how your life is. It's only when you're exposed to a difference that you realize what you know isn't how things are for everyone. My younger brother must have had one of these moments because one day over the summer while we were eating lunch, he asked me why our mom walked differently. I was pretty young, maybe 10 or so, but I understood well enough to give him a basic understanding of why she was different. We just finished this discussion and my mom comes storming in, furious and hurt, because she'd kinda sorta heard us through the wall. The master bathroom shared a wall with the kitchen, and she thought we were making fun of her condition. We got sent to our rooms before either of us can explain, and get stuck there for most of the rest of the day. Fortunately, I was a generally trustworthy kid and was able to explain what the conversation really was when I was finally called back to apologize. I loved my mom and felt awful that she'd think I'd make fun of her for being different. Definitely my biggest "you're misunderstanding me" moment. Story 19. Hit a deer, took it home to butcher it out because, heck, it just made us dip into our grocery budget to fix the car. Halfway through processing this deer, we realize we have nothing to store the meat in. I go in and do what I'm nearly certain is a thorough cleaning up. Then I'm off to the store. Collect large black trash bags, electrical tape, because I was there and needed it for a cord, cellophane, and numerous different sizes of zipper bags. Now here I am at the checkout dumping my collection as the gent behind me says, "Are you alright? You're bleeding." I look down, seeing blood I missed, but smile and offer, "Oh, it's not mine." Cue everyone to look at my selection. Do not say that. Cops do show up. Story 20. Back in 2008, I was working in a crappy, soul-sucking job. It was the end of the day Friday at the end of a particularly long week. As I was packing up to leave, a couple of coworkers, we'll call them Bob and Sarah, were leaving at the same time. We all agreed we needed a drink, so decided to hit up a happy hour together. We ended up at a gay bar because Bob is, 1, gay, and 2, knew the bartender. It should be noted that Sarah and I, a female, while allies, are both straight, relevant for later. Turns out, the bar was having a Sex and the City movie release party. Cosmos and snacks? Cool. A little while later, I'm sitting outside on a bed-like couch with Sarah while Bob gets us our next round of drinks. The photographer for the event comes by and casually asks to snap our photo, so Sarah and I lean together and smile. Snap. They asked for our names, which we assumed was to get prints later or something, so we gave them and thought that was that. Back to happy hour and griping about dead-end jobs. Fast forward to Monday morning. We're back in the office and I see Sarah leave. When she comes back, she slaps the newspaper on my desk, smirk on her face. It's the front page of the culture section, and there's a photo of me and Sarah above the fold with the headline, "The Gays Come Out in Celebration of Sex and the City Premiere." The paper definitely outed us as a gay couple. Well, my dad's coworker saw the paper and, since my last name isn't that common, showed the pic to my dad and asked if I was his daughter. I would have paid so much money to see his face in that moment. It made for an interesting conversation with my parents later, where they assured me they loved and supported me no matter what. Story 21. I have two. They both take a bit of explaining, so forgive me for a long comment. Adjusting my brother's package. This one is pretty ridiculous on its own, but I inadvertently made it much worse. A few years back, I went down south to visit my older brother for a St. Patty's Day bar crawl, where you get on a bus and visit 10 bars in than 10 hours. About 2 hours into the event, my brother thought it would be funny to stick a rolled up t-shirt down one of his pant legs to emulate a giant chicken. It looked really weird, so I put my drink down and walked over to adjust it to make it appear more phallic. So I'm bent down, squeezing it and smoothing it out, while he just stood there with his pelvis thrust forward to make it easier on me. A woman bartender happened to come out of a back room and walk past us while it was happening. She stopped and looked at us while I was just fondling away. When I noticed she was staring, the words that came out of my mouth were, "No, it's okay, he's my brother." Her eyes went wide and she turned around and walked away. That was pretty embarrassing, but it's fun to look back and laugh about it. Dr. Jerk Delicious. A couple of years ago, I worked at a stuffy banking software company as a systems administrator. A few of my coworkers were running out to the local sub shop to get lunch and asked me if I wanted to come along. I said yes, but I wanted to go to the data center floor and ask Pappy, nickname for an older gentleman on our team, if he wanted me to bring him something back for him. As he gave me his order, I typed it into a text message and sent it to myself. It arrived immediately, but I didn't acknowledge it, so it just stayed on my lock screen. While we were standing in line at the sub shop, my colleague turns to me and asks, "What did Pappy want?" Without thinking, I hold up my phone and show him Pappy's order. He reads it, gives a very subtle head nod, then quietly turns to face forward in line. Once it's finally my turn to put in my and Pappy's orders, I look down at my phone to read it off, and realize that I had forgotten to put my own name into my phone as Dr. Jerk Delicious. So when my coworker read the order on my phone, he understandably thought Pappy had texted it to me, and that I have him in my phone as Dr. Jerk Delicious. I was mortified, but when I finally noticed this egregious error, too much time had passed by for me to comfortably explain it, especially since my coworker didn't even mention it, so I would have been the one to bring it up. Never ended up explaining myself. Yeah, just put a memo in your phone, dude. No point texting yourself reminders for stuff like that. You never know, you might end up in a situation exactly like this. Story 22. I sprained my ankle quite badly in high school, but I didn't want to miss out on the final tournament as I was a senior. Since we were flying to our destination, my doctor prescribed me epinephrine shots to avoid getting an embolism, not sure of the English term, which I would have to inject into my belly once a day until the return flight. We were hosted in pairs by local families of athletes, while the coaches stayed in a hotel. One day, just as we were about to leave for the games, I remembered that I'd forgotten to take my shot in the morning, so I ran back to the room, rummaged around in my bag, fetched the needle, and lifted my shirt. Right at that moment, my mother also walks back upstairs to grab her purse or something, and we made eye contact through the open door. Her looking at me as I was injecting the epinephrine. It only took 2 seconds, but it felt like a minute, and I could read all the thoughts going around in her head, portrayed by the variety of facial expressions that she was going through. This is not what it looks like. I can explain. Luckily, I had the prescription, and the coaches knew, so they were able to explain why a 17-year-old foreigner was injecting stuff in his body under her roof. Edit. As the kind folks in the comments have pointed out, it sounds like I've confused the drug name. This happened more than 10 years ago, and I live in Europe, so drug names are often different from their North American equivalents. Story 23. Now, I usually don't use my autism as an excuse. I'm sorry, but this one moment was just an autistic moment. I had to get investigated for this. Thankfully, I was proven innocent. First off, to give context, I hated seeing my little stepbrother run around the house unclothed. I did not want him around me, and it was awful. Second, I wasn't that much of a sexual person, did not see it as that great of a thing, and I found no attraction in people. My relationship with my stepmom is just generally not very strong, so I could see why she would not trust me at all. Finally, I'm not allowed in the parents' room without permission. Of course, my impulsiveness at the time overtook their set boundaries. So I walk out of the bathroom, and I see my little stepbrother completely butt unclothed on the bed in the master bedroom. He asked me to help him find a swimsuit. At this moment, I saw a win-win situation without even thinking about the rule opposing entering the room. I could help him out, and he won't be nude anymore. Sounds good to me. I walk into the room and help searching around. I then ask him to describe the swimsuit. At this point, walking in would look really sketchy. I, not paying attention, was looking down at him beside my bed, my stepbrother butt-ass naked laying on the bed talking to me. Little did I expect the worst-case scenario. My stepmom, who I did not even hear walk up the stairs, walked in and saw this very moment that was just described. At this point, I come to the realization that it happened. I broke a rule, and it looked suspicious. Very suspicious. I won't go into full detail on what exactly happened next, but I got yelled at, and I now currently live with my mom instead. I still see dad at least once a week, but not so much my stepmom or stepbrothers. I had to be brought to my counselor, who also brought me to somebody who analyzes my behavior and my personality. He came to the conclusion that it seemed very unlikely to do such a thing, and it's a safe thing to say the benefit of the doubt is reliable. I'm still affected by this today, but I've learned to get over it and accept it. Story 24. One day after getting into my car to go to work, I was waiting for my chance to pull out into traffic. A yellow Jeep passed by with enough of a gap behind it for me to pull out and follow. Across the next 90 minutes of the commute, as I was just driving along jamming out to my music, I'd occasionally realize that I was suddenly behind the yellow Jeep again. I didn't really think anything of it besides note the coincidence and just kept driving. Well, this Jeep takes my exit, then the side road I'm taking, then the back road I'm taking. All of this with me right behind it. Well, as it turns out, we both work at the same facility, and you have to show your ID to the guards when you enter, or they won't lift the bar out of the way. As we're in the final stretch of the facility, the Jeep just floors it down the road and screeches into a stop next to the guard shack. The woman driving the Jeep is emphatically gesturing at me and talking to the guard from inside her car as I pull up. I realized what happened and just chuckled as I pull out my ID and give the usual, "Hey Frank, how's it going? Have a nice day," type of greeting to the guy who was struggling not to laugh as he lifted the bar for me to just drive by. This was a defense contractor, and I'm sure she thought something nefarious was going on, when it turns out that we just work in the same place. As another story, partly for why we've never seen each other's cars before, the facility we work at is massive, with somewhere around 1,000 to 2,000 people working at it, if I recall correctly. My usual thing when I arrive, since I have to roll my window down and show my ID to the guards anyway, is to, as I said, "Hey, how's it going? Have a nice day." And when I was leaving, if I pass one, "Have a good night." And I never really thought much about it before, just seemed like a standard thing to do. One day, probably 6 months after getting that job as an engineer, my first ever, not just my first with security concerns, a worrying moment occurred. I had gone to lunch in the big cafeteria at one end of the facility, read a book on my Kindle, put my stuff away, and was heading back to my area. Right as I was passing one of the guard shacks, like 5 to 6 guards ran out and circled me. I froze and just about shat myself, wondering if I'd somehow royally effed up. I was mentally going through all my emails, wondering if I'd made the mistake of saying something that shouldn't be on the unsecure network, which I later learned happened relatively frequently and isn't a huge deal as long as it gets caught quickly. Suddenly, one steps up with something in her hands and says, "You aren't in trouble. We just wanted to let you know that in this facility, with over 1,000 people working in it, you're the only one that ever says good morning and good night to us, and that we really appreciate it." And with that, she handed me a big plate of homemade cookies. Honestly, I was quite shocked at how this could possibly be. As I was returning to my desk, I was like, seriously? How can you possibly go through life walking past the same about 10 people several times a day and never say hello? It slightly made things awkward when my coworkers were curious how I'd gotten the cookies. Story 25. Let me preface by saying that I was the first grade student in a brand new lab, so for a while it was just my professor, our lab manager, and myself working in the lab while everything was getting set up. If anyone has ever helped set up a lab, you know that sales reps are constantly coming in and out trying to make an easy commission grab on the big equipment that labs buy with their startup funding. While I was the only student in the lab, I was trying to put together an outreach module where we would go to a 5th grade class and have them build a microscope out of Legos using 3D printed Lego lens adapter. At some point, I'm sitting in lab building this microscope to see how long it would take for kids. Both my professor and the lab manager are gone buying stuff from a company that had gone out of business when a rep walks in and I'm just sitting at my bench playing with Legos. She asked if the manager or my professor were around because they have some sweet discounts on pipette tips or something like that, and I have to tell her that they're both out and I could help her. At that point, she just looks at me like, "Seriously? Your bosses are gone and you decide to sit here and play with Legos instead of work? This is what I have to deal with?" We sit in silence for a minute before she shakes her head and says that she'll just try back later. I assume my lab now has a reputation at that company as having a grad student that plays with Legos instead of working when nobody is looking. Story 26. My best friend, we're both female, stayed over one night for a sleepover, and at some point we were underneath the bed covers, pretending it was a tent and telling each other scary stories. My mom walked in on us while I was moaning and pretending to be a ghost, and my friend was giggling at the horrible job I was doing. She turned on the light and had a horrified look on her face that I realized later was because she was fearful of me becoming a lesbian. She had a weird sex talk with us, telling us that it was not right to touch each other in our pee-pee or poo-poo places until we had husbands later in life. We were 7 years old and weren't even into boys or girls yet for that matter, so we were utterly confused about why anyone would want to touch another person's poo or pee places because that was gross, obviously. Edit. English was my mom's second language, so she often had trouble explaining things. Normally, she would use tag-along/Filipino terms like vagina is pek-pek, boobs are dede, and TT refers to the chicken, which would confuse us since titty means boob or breast in American English slang. When she would try to pronounce chicken, it would sound like pennies. Since my friend was there, though, she was trying to explain in English she thought we both would understand. Anyway, welcome to my childhood. Story 27. This actually happened yesterday. Super uncomfortable. More of a this isn't what it sounds like, but our professor was asking us what we thought, as children, when our parents fought. When he said this, it sparked a specific memory of my dad, drunk, probably slightly buzzed, and I was really little, so I took my older, wiser sister's word and was extremely worried that my dad was going to beat my mom. He obviously didn't and has never and will never hurt my mom, but for some reason this memory popped in my mind even though they weren't even fighting. So my teacher calls on me and asks, "What was your what if moment when your parents fought?" And I was taken by surprise, so I answered with the first thing that popped in my mind, which was, what if my dad hits my mom? I don't think he nor my classmates expected such a morbid answer because he gave me a quick, weird look before I could justify what I said. He asked someone else, and they had some vanilla, innocent, what if I caused the fight answer, and I just felt a whole lot of shame and worry that my classmates now think my dad beats my mom, lol. To make matters worse, a few minutes later, he was like, "Let's take a break. That was some pretty heavy stuff. Talking about family can be surprisingly emotional." He's never given us a break mid-lecture before. Story 28. I was living with this girl. Her and I were super close, but absolutely 100% platonic. Gender essentially didn't exist as a concept in our friendship, just our connection. So being boy-girl didn't ever really change the nature of our relationship. So one time we were both home, but didn't know the other was. We came in at different times and just kicked it in our respective rooms. I decided I was hungry, so in my boxers I went downstairs to get food. As I turn around to leave the kitchen, she walks in wearing nothing but panties. This is not normal for us. When I say 100% platonic, I mean it. Her having great tits wasn't even a concept to me, so we were frequently undressed near each other. So normally, this encounter would go, "Oh crap, I didn't know someone was home," with a brief scare. Then we'd go about whatever we were already doing. How did it go this time? Her boyfriend rolled in the kitchen sliding door. He found his girlfriend and I in the kitchen wearing just underwear. Thankfully, her boyfriend was one of my good friends, and he trusted both of us. Took a bit of explaining, sure, but he eventually realized it was absolutely not what it looked like. Story 29. So, I used to get really bad nosebleeds. This particular year, they were especially bad. I knew that I had to get my nose cauterized, but I was lazy and kept putting it off. One day, I'm out to breakfast with my wife, and my nose starts gushing blood. It's one of the worst ones I've ever had. I run to the bathroom, and I'm trying to get it under control, but there's blood everywhere. It's on my clothes, all over my face, all over the toilet. I sneeze, and now it's all over the walls, too. I have to text my wife and tell her to come help me. Luckily, she's used to this and isn't fazed by the Rambo-level war zone I had turned that bathroom stall into. She gets me cleaned up, but not before taking a photo of the blood-splattered crime scene to use as evidence the next time I try arguing that I don't have a problem. Flash forward to that afternoon. We're at the mall with my mom shopping for boots. We go up to the register, and my wife opens her camera roll to find the coupon she had taken a screenshot of. She hands her phone to the cashier, a sweet, bubbly girl of about 17. The girl's eyes widen with terror, and all the color drains from her face immediately. She slowly hands the phone back to my wife and whispers the only two words she can muster. "It swiped." Story 30. So, in San Antonio, back in the early 90s, they had a cable channel designated as public access, and there was a block of programming that could be used by pretty much anyone willing to send in a videotape. Think of it as what people did before YouTube. One show that took advantage of this opportunity called themselves Worst Show. Just a couple of guys trying to be entertaining in various ways. Talking at the camera in their living room, going out in the field to shoot random things with a shotgun, playing in their garage band. One time, they revealed how to make a bomb with a plastic bottle and aluminum and whatnot, and got in serious trouble over that. But instead of toning things down, they spent much of the next episode having little skits where they always found ways of reinforcing the bomb from the earlier episode. Point is, the show was usually pretty amusing. Well, one evening I was watching the show. It was usually something like midnight when it came on, and for grins, they decided to play a clip of a Yoko Ono music video. During this clip, Yoko Ono was inexplicably moaning as though having intense sex. I suppose this is actually not unexpected of her showmanship. Well, lacking any context whatsoever, it sounded exactly like an adult content, and that was the moment my mother randomly decided to see what I was watching. I'm pretty certain my hasty explanation was not taken seriously. Story 31. I was a voracious reader when I was a kid, and one author I particularly liked wrote novels for kids as well as more adult-themed ones. When I was around 11 or 12, someone lent my mother one of the more adult ones, and I pestered and pestered her to read it. She always said no, not until you're older. It's not a book for kids. My mom finished the book and lay it forgotten on a corner of her desk until I nabbed it and started to read it in secret. I have to admit, it was pretty racy and I didn't understand a lot of it, but that didn't hold me back. I was going to read this book. One night, I'm lying in bed reading the forbidden novel when suddenly my mother comes into the room. I quickly thrust both hands under my covers and must have had an expression of surprised guilt on my face. My mom gets a strange look on her face, and instead of yelling at me for disobeying her, she gently starts telling me that touching myself is okay, natural, and nothing to be ashamed of. Then it clicks. She hadn't seen the book. She thought she'd walked in on her daughter discovering her blossoming womanhood and didn't want me to end up in therapy. Dying from the sheer cringe of the situation and wanting it to stop, I brought the book out from under the covers. The look of embarrassment on Mom's face was priceless. Story 32. I think I've posted this story before. I have a really good friend who does research on human sexuality, specializing in adult content, marketing, and production. He was working on a project that involved watching thousands of hours of adult content and writing down how often different things happened, eye contact with the viewer, certain phrases, etc. So he hired people to help him, one of them being me. He gave me 45 MP4 files of different lengths that I needed to watch and code. It may sound fun, but it's incredibly boring. It took me weeks. I would try to pay attention, but they're all so badly produced and acted, and they're all essentially the same. You also have to watch them more than once in order to make sure that you didn't miss something you're supposed to note. This was around Thanksgiving, so I went home to visit my parents, and I brought my laptop with me because I figured I'd work on it at night. But I fell asleep while one of the videos was playing. My mom came in to wake me, and I freaked out. It's such a weird situation that I didn't bother explaining anything. I just let her yell at me and we never talked about it again. Story 33. When I was much younger, my parents went out of town on a trip while my girlfriend and I stayed at their house. We were on summer break from college and lived in different states. My parents made us sleep in separate beds when they were there. Strict Catholics and all that. My girlfriend and I were not having sex yet, but I doubt they believed that. Cut to a couple days later, and my girlfriend seemed to be in a lot of pain, and she sheepishly told me she was having a medical issue she didn't want to talk about. But eventually, she was in so much pain that she had to. She had what we determined was an anal fissure, which is basically just a cut on your butthole. It can make it excruciating to poop or even sit down, and there's not much you can really do for it. All the websites we read said to just sit in a tub and then put preparation H cream on it. It was late and there wasn't any drugstores open near my parents' house, and I knew there had to be some around the house. I just couldn't find it. So I called my mom and asked if there was any, and she thought I was having some issue. Starts saying she'll set up a doctor's appointment for tomorrow, etc. And she's a bit overbearing. And I'm trying to not tell her what's going on, and she just keeps pressing and keeps pressing until finally I just blurted out, Girlfriend's name has an anal fissure, okay? She was dead silent for a moment, and then quickly told me where the preparation H was. It was in some weird box of rarely used toiletries in a closet or something, for the record. And that's the story of how my very religious parents thought I was butt-effing my girlfriend, even though we weren't even having sex. So I've never heard this term before. I could have gone my whole life without envisioning what an anal fissure is. That sounds absolutely horrible. Hope you got her well with that prep H. Story 34. 12-year-old me is in school gym, about to participate in an exam to earn my green belt in karate. It was around this time that my eyesight was deteriorating, but a couple of months before I would end up with glasses. Sometimes, in order to see things more clearly, I would put my fingers to the corners of my eyes and stretch them, narrowing the focus enough for me to make out details on the blackboard or whatever. So I arrive along with some friends, and we're just wandering around waiting for things to get started when I look up to see the silhouette of a man standing on a balcony that overlooked the main hall. It is then that I remember that we had invited the founder of the organization to attend, who had come all the way from Japan and was touring around Europe. This imperious-looking, shadowy figure looks like he might fit the bill, but I'm not certain, as he's far away and rather blurry. So I step forwards, crane my neck upwards, and press my fingers to the corner of my eyes. Story 35. Not me directly, but feel this story is relevant. We just moved into a new house. My older sister, who was about 5 at the time, was refusing to get in the bath, and my mum was throwing the classic, "You wait till your father gets home." After a lot more yelling, and Mum struggling, we'd hear Dad pull up in the driveway. My sister was so worked up about getting in trouble from Dad, she ran straight out of the house, completely naked, to Dad's car, screaming repetitively, "No, Daddy, no!" and continued to run around the front yard screaming. Well, our new neighbors across the street heard her screaming, and when they saw her running around the yard naked, rushed over to rescue her and started yelling at Dad to stay away. My poor dad had no idea what was going on, and Mum came out and explained what was actually happening. That family became lifelong friends of ours. Turned out they had a daughter 2 days older than me. We're still best friends, and our families have adopted each other as second families. The neighbor that rescued my sister even emceed my sister's wedding and told that story. The story even still comes up at barbecues, despite happening 30-odd years ago. Story 36. I used to work as a teaching assistant in a school for children with special needs. I was often assigned to kids that needed a dedicated person to help them, so the lead teacher could continue with the lesson. One of the kids I had would have minor seizures that would pass after about a minute, so the best thing to do was to wrap him up in my arms so they don't fall and hit their head or accidentally hurt themselves. It was one of my first days with the kid and he started to seize, so I reached for him to help hold him still, but he turned suddenly and hit his face against my hand and fell down. It looked like I had just punched a child in the face and knocked him to the ground. Fortunately, the lead teacher saw what happened and the kid was totally fine, but it scared me so badly. I thought I had lost my job for sure and was going to have charges filed or something. Story 37. We used to play the card game Mao in high school, and one of the rules our group added was if a certain combo of cards happened, you had 30 seconds to break a major school rule. The most common rule to break was the no boy and girl together in a room with the door closed and lights off. So we'd snag someone of the opposite gender, run into a dark classroom, shut the door, and then ruffle up our hair and clothing for dramatic effect. One weekend, a large group of us were hanging out and playing Mao in the empty dining hall. Context: boarding school. Someone played the requisite card combo, and 4 or 5 people ran into the next room to ruffle up their clothing, bite their lips, and try to look as debauched as possible. While they're gone, the dean of students walks by, and seeing a group of us well-behaved nerds, stops to chat. Cue exaggerated moaning from the other room, followed by a handful of students swaggering in with shirts untucked and ties undone. He looked at us, laughed, and then walked away. Story 38. When I was younger, I went over to this guy's house to hang out and go swimming. He lived at home. I went into the guest room and changed into my swimsuit and left my things there. When we were done swimming, I went back into the guest room to change, but I had to be really quiet and keep the lights off because his baby nephew was in there sleeping. When I was about to leave the room, he started to wake up, so the guy came in. After a couple minutes, his dad opened the door, and the guy I was hanging out with goes, "Don't turn on the lights, Dad." The dad angrily says, "I will turn on the lights." He thought we were naked and getting it on. Instead, he flipped the lights on and found us fully clothed, laying on either side of the baby, trying to calm him down and get him back to sleep. Shouldn't have turned on the lights, Dad. Story 39. When I was in my formative years, I enjoyed watching Comedy Central late at night. After a certain magical hour, you would start to see Girls Gone Wild commercials between episodes of South Park or other shows. I didn't mind because who doesn't love looking at little stars and hearing steel drums? Anyways, one night I'm doing homework with headphones in, but the TV is on next to me. I wasn't really paying attention, more focused on my music and work. Well, I see my dad walk into the living room from the corner of my eye, and he stops. I glance up, and he has this odd look on his face, confusion and possibly disappointment. I turn towards the TV that he's staring at, and what commercial is gracing us with its unwanted presence? Guys Gone Wild. Not as popular in my teenage years, but with the same premise. I scrambled for the remote in a flurry, which probably only made it look as if I were caught in the act. Before I could really say anything, he had left the room. Whatever question he had for me was far from his mind. Story 40. A little background. I was driving home with my wife and having a few conversations on long-term goals and where we sort of see ourselves in the future. I had recently changed phones and hadn't imported all my contacts yet. Now, mind you, she was all, "I'm so happy that I met and married you. I never thought I'd be so lucky," and stuff when I get this random text from a non-stored number. A little more context. I have a few friends who I've known for 10 to 12 years, and we routinely refer to each other as whatever the heck feels right in that moment. Evidently, my friend feels the need to refer to me as babe instead of bro. This is just as my wife picks up the phone to play some music. She sees a text come in saying, "Hey babe, when are you free? Need to get together soon. I want to show you something." Bruh, timing. Anyways, she completely freezes and looks at me with these heartbroken eyes when I say, "Babe," chuckles at how this happens on TV, but I never thought it happened in real life. I swear this is not what it looks like. There's a perfectly logical and reasonable explanation for this. I just don't know it yet. I have absolutely no clue what this is. Sure enough, she starts crying and goes through the motions on the whole "how could you" thing. Then I'm like, okay, let's call and see. Then she moved on to, "I can't believe you made me go through that." It was an interesting evening. The makeup sex was great. Story 41. Went on a field trip in the 6th grade to these weird caves out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada. The group went on a lunch break, and so some of us went and sat on these benches that formed a big circle. These benches had cool pictures facing the inside of the circle that a girl and her friend were taking pictures of. I happened to be sitting in front of one of these pictures with one of my friends when the girl and friend came around. They wanted to take a picture of the one I sat in front of, but I was being a little 6th grade jerk and wouldn't move. So the girl, who apparently had a crush on me, knelt down and tried moving my legs. This eventually led to her spreading my legs by my knees and accidentally doing a slight thrust into my crotch. She quickly backed up, embarrassed with my friend and I laughing. I sometimes still bug her about it now, freshman in college. Story 42. This was back in college. I play drums and I have a carload of gear that I'm taking to my guitarist friend's house while no one is home. No big deal. I know the code for his garage door and the code to turn off the alarm. I should mention that my drum set is pretty massive, so it's taking up all the space in the trunk of my station wagon with the seats down. Lots of gear. I get there, open the garage, no problem, and then I open the door into the house. The alarm starts beeping normally. Okay, then in about 5 seconds, it goes from the, "Hey, you should probably turn me off" beep to the intruder beep. I frantically try to turn it off, but no luck. I panic and call my friend. Cops show up minutes later, driving very fast from both directions on this quiet suburban street. One gets out and yells, "Freeze!" And there I am, garage open and alarm blaring in the background, with a giant carload of stuff. I'm shaking, and the best I could stammer out was, "I'm bringing stuff in." Turns out the alarm was malfunctioning, and after I called my friend, his mom called the police station to let them know what was going on. So by the time the cops were barreling down the street, they already knew this, and were basically screwing with me. One asked why I was so nervous. Officer, I'll get back to you on that after I clean the crap out of my pants." Story 43. I, 34F, am a paraprofessional, fancy word for teacher's aide, in a special ed department of a high school. One day, our students were at an assembly and I was alone in the room with one of our peer leaders. Peer leaders are general ed kids who earn a credit by working in our class one semester. That day, our peer leader was an 18-year-old male senior. We have a closet in our room where we store books, puzzles, etc. There was a box on the top shelf that I thought contained some puzzles I needed, and I asked the student, he's 6 feet tall, to come in and grab it off the shelf for me. He comes in the closet with me and the door shuts. No big deal. It doesn't lock from the inside and there's a light in there. He pulls the box down, but it doesn't contain what I needed. As he reached for the box, I said something along the lines of, "You're about to lose your pants there," because his pants were noticeably hanging pretty low. He laughed it off and said he needed a new belt. Well, I opened the door to the closet and there stands my teacher, students, and several parents who'd come to pick up their children as it was the end of the day. I walk out of the closet empty-handed, followed by an 18-year-old tightening his belt. Story 44. My ex told me this story, and I think about it a lot. Just want to say up top that I don't believe physical punishments for children are effective, and I think they can be very damaging and cruel. This was before I was in her and her lovely kids' lives, however, and her ex-husband apparently did not feel the same way I did. This is the story that was told to me by her. I've often wondered what actually happened, if it happened the way she said it did, or if something more sinister was happening. Anyway, here's what I was told. While she was on her way home, her ex-husband was giving a spanking to their son. He was misbehaving like children do, and I guess her ex was the kind of guy who spanks kids. So the kid was crying and trying to run away, because, well, he was being hit. While trying to escape his punishment, the poor kid ran into a bedpost, and it gave him a black eye. That's exactly when his mom comes home. Hears her son screaming, she runs to him, sees him covering his face, holding his eye and crying. Also, his parents are down because he was just getting a spanking. That's when her ex-husband said, quote, "It's not what it looks like." Although, when you think about it, it actually kind of was. Anyway, what happened next between her and her ex-husband is a story for another thread. But this story is kind of a 2-for-1. Because the next day at school, that sweet little boy walked into the classroom with a shiner, and the teacher said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And he couldn't exactly articulate what had happened. He just said, "My dad was giving me spankings because I was bad." So the teacher called CPS immediately, and then my poor little boy and my ex and her husband and their other kid got to spend the rest of the day explaining that it wasn't what it looked like to CPS. Story 45. One from before my husband and I got married. We moved in with each other, and over the years between that and other roommates had managed to collect a small pile of can openers, most of which didn't work well. So when I'm cooking a casserole for dinner, I'd pull out a can opener, try it wouldn't work easy, so I'd grab the next one, etc. Until I found the one good can opener we owned that would open the 5 cans I needed. I'd then leave those other openers on the counters to deal with later. Maybe ask SO if we should toss or donate them or if they can be sharpened. But I'd forget that he'd wash them and put them away, and I wouldn't remember which one was the good one for the next time. So the cycle would repeat. Until finally he asked me, after months of this, "Why do you use 1 can opener per can?" Story 46. So when I was 4, my 23-year-old female cousin came to visit from Minnesota. She was cool, overalls and boots and short hair, piercings, etc. Very forward-thinking in rural Oregon, 1994. She took me to Toys R Us, and I remember having a great time. But then I got tired and laid down in an aisle, and refused to move or get up. Start throwing a full tantrum. My cousin asks, pleads, begs me to get up, to no avail. She gently grabs an arm and starts trying to pick me up, at which point I start screaming, shrilly and panicky, "You're not my mom! You're not my mom!" Pandemonium. This big dude and his wife in the same aisle step over. My cousin starts stammering an explanation, and this guy just says, "We're waiting for the manager." The manager gets there, small crowd gathering. I'm crying, just so damn tired, you know? I need a nap, bad. The manager separates us, turns me over to a super sweet staff lady who I was immediately sweet with, and takes my cousin to the proverbial basement. Calls the cops. Cops come and ask for ID. She's from Minnesota, has a different last name than me, and is generally acting like a 23-year-old accused of child abduction would, very nervously. 1994, people. No cell phones, no Facebook, nothing at all. To confirm, this weird-looking child snatcher is who she says she is. Long story short, they use the yellow pages to call my mom's work, get through to her, confirm the story, corroborate with me. Whole thing took hours. I took my nap and played games in the store with an employee. Then they finally released me back to my cousin. I gleefully shouted, "Tracy!" her name, ran to her and gave her a big hug. I was a little hurt she had left me alone for so long on our big day. World of crap waiting for me at home. That's the first time I remember being in very serious trouble. This story has become a family reunion classic. Story 47. Another lawyer, old lawyer, in my office was hired to sue large adult content company for including a video of his client in a compilation DVD called Kansas Cougars X or something. Apparently, she didn't know she was in a sex tape until her ex-husband called from an offshore oil rig to let her know the guys were enjoying her scene during movie night and giving him hell about it. Old lawyer was a solid civil litigator, but not tech-savvy. First task was to locate said compilation DVD and obtain a copy to verify the ex-husband's story. Apparently, he had destroyed the copy on the oil rig because he got tired of seeing whatever roughnecks do when group watching adult content of his children's mother. Old lawyer asked me to help him shop for the DVD. Sadly, being a child of the internet, I wasn't up to speed on paying for adult content. Worse, old lawyer had started to search himself, and his desktop was infested with adult content-related malware. I was damned if this research was happening on my computer. Picture two frustrated lawyers hunched over an ancient desktop, lights turned down to better see crappy thumbnails of cougars, while random windows popped up playing the wrong adult content. This crap had been going on for a couple hours, and old lawyer was buying my help with his uber-expensive whiskey. So, drunk, frustrated lawyers, sleeves rolled up, ties down, red-faced. That's when new secretary walked in, just in time for a pop-up to autoplay something utterly not safe for work. We didn't even see her until she accidentally backed into a shelf. Our reaction, simultaneously, "It's for a case!" Her reaction, weird strangling noise. Q attempts to explain that made it worse. "We're looking for a video of a client. This adult content just pops up on my computer, and of course, it's not what it looks like." Yeah, I was sending my own faxes, in old lawyers, for months. Story 48. LMAO. Oh man, I have a good one. Picture this. Senior high schooler me. I had service period in one of the offices of my school, which just meant we could goof around for an hour and a half, occasionally going to grab students from class. Everyone who worked in that particular office was young, mid to late 20s, so we got along great. One of the TAs that hung around in there a lot happened to be one that I had a major crush on, so, double yay for me. His best friend was also a TA, so they'd be in there pretty often just hanging out with us. One day, the two guys went out and grabbed food for all of us, and we're all just eating in the adjacent conference room, standard for us. Crush! TA was sitting next to me, duh, and I distinctly remember that I was laid out on the table while we chatted. His friend was like, "Alright, we should head back," and got up and walked out. Crush stood up to go. When he walked past me, I noticed his fly was down, so I told him. He stopped, and as he was adjusting it, his friend walked back in, and his face! Crush had stopped right in front of where my face was and got caught with his hands on his zipper. His friend just looked at us, then looked up and said, "My God, I really hope this is a case of this isn't what it looks like. I'm gonna walk out and walk back in." We were cracking up for like 5 minutes straight. That wasn't the last time he caught us in a weird out-of-context moments, but it's still the best one. Side note, I did get that chicken once I graduated. Story 49. I have two. I grew up with two older brothers. I always looked up to them a lot. I was embarrassed that I played with Barbies because it was so girly and preferred to hide it like a guilty pleasure, even though everyone knew I had Barbies and I didn't know why it embarrassed me. One time, my brother entered my bedroom when I was pretending my Barbies were in a band and I was mortified. Later that week, I sat my mom down and said I wanted her to tell everyone to knock before entering my room from now on, because sometimes I just want alone time and don't want anyone walking in on me. She was convinced one of my brothers walked in on me self-pleasuring and that was what I meant. At that point, I was too far gone and couldn't convince her otherwise. I just didn't want to be caught playing with my Barbies because I thought it was uncool. Another time when I was a kid, I was reading some video game fan fiction on our old Windows 98 computer that was in the basement. I didn't want to explain to my mom what fan fiction was because I thought it was embarrassing. She was very invested in my life and interests and always wanted to read what I was reading. And I didn't want her to know I was reading about romances between video game characters. She came downstairs when I was in the middle of a romantic chapter, and I panicked and closed the browser. She caught me just as it happened, with me now sitting awkwardly staring at the blank desktop. She wouldn't believe me when I told her I wasn't looking at adult content. So guys, you're kind of doing this to yourselves by acting awkward and guilty. If you're not doing anything wrong and someone quote-unquote catches you doing it, just own it because you're not doing anything wrong. And let's be honest, there's really nothing wrong with looking at, I won't go there. there. Nah, don't look at it. Story 50. Pulled a prank during my junior year of high school. Since my parents weren't down with the whole let's F up and get suspended thing, I asked a friend to let me use his dad's shop and begged a day off work so my parents wouldn't notice my absence. So there I am, 7 a.m. on a Saturday, when my friend wanders in to find me rubbing Vaseline from a half-gallon tub all over a mannequin's arm and singing along to Cyndi Lauper. He sets the coffee he brought me down, clears his throat loud enough for me to notice, and walks straight back out. Anytime I'd borrowed the shop before, it was one interruption after the next. Friend coming in to BS, his father coming in to make suggestions, his mother coming in to offer me food. Even his little sister would put in appearances to steal whatever tool I was using and hide it. Not that day. No one came out to visit. I didn't notice at the time, being literally up to my elbows in plaster of Paris and expanding foam, but when I knocked on the door to thank them for use of the shop and get someone to lock it up, the door was mysteriously unanswered, despite the fully lit house, full complement of cars in the driveway. And then he wouldn't speak to me at lunch on Monday. Thankfully, when the foam zombie arms started popping up on campus, my buddy figured it out. Story 51. My dad thought I was doing drugs in the bathroom, and I only found out because my mom confronted me about it. This is around September of 2010. I'd graduated earlier that year from high school. I have 3 siblings, so I was out of high school and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. My dad and mom were separated, but not divorced. I was living at my dad's at the time. I was also up all night and would go to bed around 8 or 9 in the morning because I was up playing Modern Warfare 2. My dad had been telling me a day before that I need to take initiative and start putting out more job applications and looking for an apartment, as well as cleaning the house and other stuff since I was always home. Anyways, I was up all morning and my brother had gotten up to get ready for school and started eating cereal on the couch. He finished and put the bowl in the sink, but had dropped the spoon underneath the couch and didn't pick it up. I saw this after he left and decided to pick up the house a bit. I picked up the spoon, a twist tie that you find on loaves of bread, and finally a piece of foil from some candy. I had also started the laundry, our washer and dryer were in the bathroom, and forgot the items in there. Then proceeds to pass out on the couch until Dad came home from school. He didn't wake me up or anything, but apparently went into the bathroom and saw the spoon and trash and called my mom and sent a picture of it to her. I still haven't talked to my dad about it, but when I told my mom what happened, she couldn't stop laughing her ass off at me. Story 52. So I went to McDonald's one morning because breakfast. Rode my bike since it was like a mile away and no car at the time. So far so good. Get some McMuffins or whatever and a McFlurry. Riding home with a McDonald's bag in hand, and I stop at a light and a cop pulls up next to me, windows down. I say something like, "Morning, officers," and they say good morning back. Then the officer in the passenger seat, closest to me, is like, "Hey, so we just had a call about an incident at McDonald's involving a guy in blue shorts and black shirt." I look down. Lo and behold, I'm wearing that exact outfit. My exact words were, "I had nothing to do with that, but I understand what it looks like," and asked if it was cool if I took a seat on the curb until we had this figured out. They took my info and gave me some more info on what the call was about. Black lady being harassed or something. Definitely not me. At this point, I'm asking cops if it's cool if I eat my McFlurry since it was melting. Arizona heat, probably in the 90s already, even at 7 in the morning. They said that's fine, and they relay my info to the other officers, and the lady who called it in instantly said it wasn't me. So we laughed about it. They said I'm free to go and everything was fine. Went home and finished breakfast. Not exactly a "this isn't what it looks like," but it fits well enough. Story 53. The Cream Puff event of 2016. My girlfriend and I had just started dating and we were at her house for New Year's Eve. Her mother made these huge homemade cream puffs with all the fixings. These things were like footballs of high cholesterol. My girlfriend is also a type 1 diabetic and very much a food lover. She will also bite your hand off if you even look at her food. She decided to have one and I recommended she test her blood first. She was like 350, which is really high and not healthy. She figured she'd eat it and then pump, but I said I don't feel comfortable with that. She tried to fight me to get at the fridge, she tried to hood slide over the counter, she tried pulling my hair, she fought dirty for a cream puff. At some point, we ended up wrestling on the other side of the room. I was trying to pin her down and she was trying to play bite, I'm pretty sure. Me, when her younger sister came downstairs to get herself a cream puff. She just said, "You two are weird," and walked back upstairs. We looked at the clock and realized we probably spent an hour to an hour and a half play fighting. At this point, she was starting to go low, so we split a cream puff. Anywho, that was our first big fight. Story 54. When I was pregnant with my middle child, we lived out in the middle of the sticks, a full hour from the nearest hospital. The route required long country roads, then a slow weave through a tiny little town set up like a city, complete with lights at every other block and some one-ways and whatnots before you get to the highway to the hospital. We had a 2-year-old with us who had to be picked up by his grandparents, and being the second baby, the contractions got closer together a lot faster than the first time. So we were in a big rush once we left the house, my husband driving and our oldest in the back in his car seat, and me doing my breathing and sitting with my hands on my belly and just trying not to have a baby in the car. It was dusk, just starting to get dark, so he turned on the headlights and we set off. We got all the way through the winding country roads quickly, no problem, no traffic, but once in town, we noticed headlights behind us. My husband said he didn't care, we were in a hurry, and he kept on speeding a bit. Realized too late that it was a cop and we were getting pulled over for, we assumed, speeding. It figured. So, still in a state of half panic and half hurry, my husband makes the absolutely terrible decision to open the driver's seat the second he gets the car into park and go sprinting towards the police car to tell the cop, "My wife is in labor," like some Flintstones episode. Well, as fast as I've seen anyone move in my life, that cop threw his door open, knelt behind it on one knee, and had a shotgun from his dash mount over the edge of the door and pointed at my husband as he was yelling for my husband to stop. My husband stopped and threw his hands up in the air and yelled what was up, and the cop relaxed and came up and checked on me and our son and then explained we had a taillight out. He told us to put on our hazard lights / four-ways and leave them on the whole way to the hospital and get it fixed ASAP and told us to have a good night. I still have a mini panic attack every time I tell the story. That child is now 23 years old. Story 55. A couple of months ago, we had to take some mandatory safety training for a job we were going on. This training was at some non-descriptor building in an office park somewhere outside Berkeley, California. After lunch, we were hanging out outside the building just shooting the crap, right in front of the entrance door, blocking it. My buddy points out a pigeon sitting on top of an electrical box on the side of the building about 8 feet up or so. The bird has 2 or 3 baby birds with it. It's staring at us intently. I had half my sandwich left over from lunch with me, and for some reason I decided that the mama bird looked hungry, so I thought I'd offer her some of my sando. So I break off a bit of bread and toss it up towards the bird. All the while, I'm saying things like, "Hey mama, you want some? Here you go mama, check it out," and making those kissy noises you make while trying to get an animal's attention. Nothing derogatory or sexual or catcally. I was genuinely speaking to the bird, just goofing around. There were 4 or 5 of us standing there, all dudes. We were all looking up at this mama bird and its babies, trying to get it to eat some sandwich bread. Just as I finished saying, "Here mama, take it. You're hungry, you want this," kissy noise, my buddy taps my shoulder and says, "Hey, look out, make some room." I look down. I'm 6'3", 190 centimeters, and I see this small Hispanic lady actively avoiding my eye contact, trying to get in the building. She hurries by, super concerned. It took about 2 seconds after the door closes it for me to dawn on me that that lady probably thinks I was catcalling her. I felt horrible, absolutely horrible, but I think tracking her down and explaining would have made it worse. Story 56. We first got Sky TV, and it was a time when you could switch the receiver and get German channels. This opened up a world of adult content, and I was a 14, 15-year-old, and I was taking full advantage. Only problem was, the only place we had Sky TV was in our living room, so I had to sneak downstairs and put the TV on mute. After a while, my dad asked me one day what I was doing, so I told him I couldn't sleep, so would go get a drink and sit in the living room for a bit. He didn't like to hear noises when he thought everyone was in bed, but no drama. I then thought, if Dad thought I was someone in the house, he might get up, so I then somehow discovered that you could watch a channel but tune the audio to another channel. The perfect crime. I could watch the dodgy German adult content and spank my monkey, and the audio would be something normal. Dad would hear me and put the TV on. It's not a burglar, so I could finish and go back to bed. One day, the audio changed to football highlights. Dad must have got up and thought, I'll keep him company as he watches the football. He walks in with me cracking one off. He doesn't even look at the TV before walking out. Never a word is said. Few years later, when I take my first serious girlfriend home to meet my family, Dad's surprised that she's a girl. I then realized for years he assumed I was beating off to a load of footy players every night. Kudos to Dad for not freaking out. Story 57. I was 14 and on a school field trip to New York. While we were there, we visited the M&M store. I looked around for a bit and decided to buy a blue t-shirt with an M&M on it. So I go up and buy it, and after the cashier gave me the receipt, my stupid suburban-raised ass said instantly threw it out. So after that, I go to one of the adults moderating the trip and they ask me where another one of the kids are. I knew where he was, so I went into the store to find him, and I was doing all this while holding the shirt because I didn't get a bag. I end up finding the kid and we both go outside, and I instantly put the t-shirt over my shirt. Within 30 seconds, a security guard comes out asking me if I stole the shirt. I would also like to note that I never caused trouble as a kid, so I never was confronted about doing something wrong. I said no, I bought it, and she says, well, where's the receipt? And that's where my heart effing dropped. So I ended up pointing to the guy who I bought the t-shirt from, but that wasn't enough. So I had to end up digging through the trash with an angry security guard in the middle of the busy M&M store. Thankfully, though, I found the receipt and all was resolved. I can't wear the shirt now, though, without getting a PTSD-like feeling. Story 58. Several years ago, I was doing a lot of end-of-season yard work. I cut down a small tree, had trimmed a few rose bushes, and was getting towards the end of the job, the cleanup. I start chopping up pieces of the tree for easy bagging, and I notice that the wind is kind of picking up, and there are clouds rolling in. I check my weather app and see a line of nasty storms coming in. Time to get serious. Except I realize I just used my next to last lawn bag, and I have no twine to tie up the bigger branches. I decide I've got a bit of time before the storms get here, and hurriedly make a run to Kmart, realizing on the way there that my small hatchet had broken earlier, so I could pick up a new one while I'm there. Now, at this point, I've spent the better part of 6 hours working in the yard. I'm sweaty, I'm covered in dirt, and thanks to my overgrown rose bushes, I have little scratches all over my arms. This is not a store I frequent, so while I have a vague idea of where the stuff I need might be, I don't have time to piss around looking for it. Fortunately, about 30 seconds after entering the store, a bubbly kid, probably high school aged, asks if he can help me find anything. I blurt out, yes, I need a hatchet, some wine, and a box of heavy-duty lawn trash bags. I'm standing there maintaining eye contact, waiting for directions to my desired destinations. Instead, this kid turns white as a ghost, starts stuttering, and ever so slowly backing away from me. At this point, I realize this kid probably thinks, holy crap, this lady's trying to hide a body. Feeling obligated to explain myself, I add, I'm just finishing up some yard work and I need to get it finished up before it rains. The kid still looked at me like he was trying to memorize my description for when the cops question him later, but that at least got him to point me in the right direction. Story 59. I was traveling through rural Aussie National Park and driving at night when I saw a pod of roos by the roadside. I slowed to 30 kmph and they didn't seem too bothered. As I was passing, a big male, eastern gray, so not huge, but still a unit, did a giant leap from lying down, and although I swerved, he collided with my bonnet. There's a little imprint of his front paw to this day. I pulled over, grabbed my torch and Steth, and dragged him off the road. He was badly concussed, erratic heart sounds, fluid on his lungs, and blood coming from his mouth and nose, unable to move, and had probably fractured his spine and appeared to have sustained spinal cord damage. UMN signs for those interested. I didn't have any euthanasia drugs on me, and no cars had come, and although his pod was watching me from their scattered positions, I had to put him out of his misery. I decided to try a cervical dislocation, and then I was illuminated by the headlights of 3 cars passing. There I was, by the side of the road, a roo down, my hand on its twisted neck, and boot in the air ready to do my business. So, I guess, yeah, I was doing it, but my car was okay, and it sort of looked like I was just out there murdering the wildlife at 3 a.m. Worst part is that one of the cars had children, and one was awake. We made eye contact. The cervical dislocation was unsuccessful because his neck muscles were too tight, so I had to run back to my car and grab my cattle scissors so I could finish off the poor bloke. And guess what? One more car illuminates me while I'm doing it. I'm probably someone's let's not meet. Story 60. So I worked at a place where a guy who checked my paperwork every day became such a nitpicker that I was having to redo almost everything. It was all stupid and inconsequential stuff, so the nitpicking was just to make my life harder. One day I find out that he was an ex-gay adult content star. Like, legit. so I ordered one of his DVDs on Amazon or some such site, with the intention of being an a-hole and printing out some of the pictures and leaving them around work. Side note, I'm much older, wiser, and more kind. I would never do what I did again. So I accomplished my mission and had the DVD in the back of my car that day, and thought nothing of it when I went over to visit my parents. Well, my mom, wanting to be the beautiful mother that she is, decided to leave me a present in my car. Guess what she finds? She left her present, took the DVD, and never said a word about it to me. I'm married with 3 kids and was engaged at the time. A few years later, I brought it up and we had a good laugh about it. Edit because more of the story makes it sound even funnier/scarier. This is a totally pun-worthy ending to the story. Before I finish, I want to add that he did way more than just mess with me paperwork-wise. He threatened me and generally tried to run me out of the job. So, after our villain discovers what I had done, he tells me to follow him into the supply closet to have a word with me. So now I'm in the closet with a gay adult content star, at which time he pulls his pistol out. I likewise pull mine out, and he tells me he's going to shoot me and proceeds to yell at me. I finally calm him down by apologizing. What I did was wrong, I admit it, and telling him that getting into a gunfight in the middle of our gun store, yes, we worked at a gun store, was something that would not end well for either of us. But anyways, puns galore about being in the closet with a gay adult content star, pulling our pieces out and threatening to blow our loads all over each other. How was that? Story 61. This one happened to my mom. My mom lost her wedding ring many years ago, and my dad finally decided to get her a new one for Christmas. But my mom is not a jewelry person, so ultimately she decided she didn't want it/need one since she'd been without one for the past 8 years. She was going to return it in a few days and use the money for something else she wanted. Now, my mom is really into cross-country skiing, and the next day she took a nasty fall on a sharp downhill and face-planted into a tree, resulting in a slight concussion and a nasty black eye. A few days later, I went to the mall with her to go to the jewelry store where my dad got the new ring. My mom walks up to the counter, looks at the sales associate with her awful, now yellowing, bruised eye, and says calmly, "I'd like to return my wedding ring." Story 62. This happened a couple years back at my gym. I was the only person in the bathroom. A small bathroom that was all tiled out and had 3 to 4 urinals and 2 to 3 stalls. I stood at the urinal looking down at my phone, which was in my left hand, scrolling through Reddit. As I was peeing and scrolling, I saw something funny that warranted a screen cap. No idea what it was, so I decided to release my right hand of its control duty for just a second so that I could take a screen cap, and right as I decide to do this, someone walks in and pulls up at the stall immediately to my right. And this is when my phone proceeds to make the loudest screen cap noise in this small, quiet, tilted bathroom. The sound echoed. At least it felt like it did. If you're not familiar with the iPhone screen cap noise, it's the exact same noise made when taking a picture, the sound of a camera shutter. Startled and realizing I just appeared to be unshamedly taking a chicken pic at the urinal, I decided to pretend like nothing happened, pulled up my shorts, and left to work out. I like to believe that this guy is still telling the story about how he walked in on a guy taking a bathroom chicken pic. Story 63. In the 90s, I played rugby in high school. We had to fundraise to be able to tour. Our coach got us to help out for a friendly tournament near our city at the local ground, out in farmland. USA/Argentina and Canada/Uruguay. Some guys did parking, some were water boys, etc., and I got picked to be one of the assistants for the doping instructors. I was young and naive and thought, this is awesome, such responsibilities. The credibility of sport depends on me, etc., and so on. So I got to be up close with the players and even had a WADA doping inspector armband. Kept it. It's still at my parents' house. It was a super humid, hot day, so I was happy to be able to sit on the sidelines and chill and watch the games. At the end of the second game, the doping instructor guy points out to me and my teammate who go and grab one player from each team. To my delight, mine was the player who played the same position as me, from my country. Prop Canada. I ran over to him and explained, very professionally, that he had been selected for testing and that he should come with me, and that I was very excited to meet him. I thought this was all so cool. He was not happy. The Uruguayan player came over with a chaperone and in broken English started making jokes about why were us young guys so excited to see their chickens. I hadn't quite thought this through. Obviously, we had to follow them and then watch them urinate into a jar to make sure there was no cheating. Live and learn. We went under the main stand and were sequestered in the women's locker rooms, away from everyone else. The Uruguayan player was a champ and filled up his jar right away. My teammate then got to go with him and hang out in the Uruguay locker room. My player made it clear that he was dehydrated and didn't have to go. The doping inspector told him to start chugging water and to not go anywhere, and left me to keep watch while he went to do whatever else doping instructors do. My player was hot and tired and pissed about the whole situation, and said he was going to shower. I tried to say that the inspector had told us to stay here, so that's what we should do, as he ignored me and walked out the door and into the women's showers. The ground is out in the sticks, basic well water, and had essentially no hot water. I stood nervously by the shower entrance, trying to remain professional, keeping watch for any attempts of doping shenanigans, in this very important job I'd been given. He stripped off, turned on one of the showers, and got under the steam of water. Then promptly clutched his chest and collapsed to the ground. I froze. He was writhing around and gasping, then looked over to me and reached out a hand. Instead of shouting for help like any normal person would do, in a moment of insanity, I thought to myself, he's having a heart attack, and I'm the only person in the world who can save this man's life. It's imperative that I perform CPR on him. To this day, I've never been trained in CPR. I rushed over and, for whatever reason, straddled him as he lay on the floor of the shower, the water raining down, and started pumping on his chest, mimicking what I'd seen on TV and in movies. In retrospect, I remember him weakly struggling against me, but I guess I was so intent on saving his life it didn't quite register at the time. Then I leaned down from my perch upon this giant, naked man and tried to breathe into his mouth as he weakly struggled to stop me. At this point, there was a shout from the doorway, and I looked up to see the chief doping inspector, the Uruguayan player, and my teammate standing there, aghast, laughing hysterically, and bemused in that order. My player pushed me off him onto the ground and got on all fours, huffing and puffing. There was lots of commotion. The team doctors were called, and my player was fine after like 5 minutes. The Uruguayan player was crying, he was laughing so hard. Because it was so hot that day, when my player went under the ice-cold water, with the change of temp, his lungs had collapsed. Obviously not the right term, but anyone who jumped in a cold lake on a hot day knows what I mean. And he couldn't breathe. After a little while, and a lot of fussing around from coaches and other players, he was calmed down and able to see the funny side of things. I was mortified. The Canadian team invited me to stay for dinner and drinking with the Uruguay team afterwards. I got to get drunk with my sporting heroes, so it wasn't all bad in the end. Story 64. My SO brought home a prostitute once. We were both living and working in a developing country. Think something like the Peace Corps. We were housemates and had fallen for each other pretty quickly, and were a few weeks into a relationship. One night he felt like going out with some friends, and I felt like staying in, but soon I missed him and waited up for him. He missed me too, so he came back earlier than his friends. The country we were living in was kinda conservative, so they had this system whereby hookers would wait in the front seat of taxis, so any guy who wanted a prostitute would just get into the taxi and do some stuff in the car, or take her home. If you didn't want a prostitute, you got a taxi that was empty. If there wasn't an empty taxi, you got in and asked the hooker to leave. Or, if you're really shy like my SO, you don't notice that there's a prostitute in the front seat of your taxi until after you get in, and then you're too polite to ask her to leave. I watched the taxi pull up to the front of the house with a woman in the front seat. My SO got out, spoke to the woman and the driver for a minute or two, and then they drove away. My SO comes in and drunkenly starts kissing me like we'd been apart for a year. I ask if there was a woman in his taxi. Yes. I ask if she was a hooker. Yes. I ask if he actually brought a hooker home. Yes, but it's starting to dawn on him that he may be in some kind of situation. So I had to decide, is this guy the kind of a-hole who hires prostitutes and brings them home to his brand new girlfriend? Or is he the kind of a-hole who's not terribly observant and is too nice to tell a hooker to piss off? We've been together 13 years now. I'm pretty sure I made the right decision. Story 65. Shared this last time. I still cringe. Was a lonely nerd in high school. A super nice kid from art class asked my sister out. She's a year younger and partied. I stayed home and tried to tape videos from 120 minutes. Phone rings and I panic and freak. There is an extension next to my stepdad's side of the bed. I whisper hello. It's the nice guy, and he's worried because he took my sister to a party and she ended up getting crap-faced. I tell him I'll meet him out front and help her sneak in. He pulls up and I open his passenger door and end up just tossing my sister over my shoulder and wave him away. I turn towards the house and she pukes down my back. God damn it. I manage to stagger down the hall and flop her on her bed. I instantly strip my shirt off and urgently whisper to her to put on her PJs. My stepdad ruled the house with a belt, and if she got busted, we'd all be on lockdown. She moans and drools. I help her pull her pants off, pull her sweater over her head. She starts flopping around. Take off my bra. Take off bra, she's slurring, waving one arm ineffectually. Crap. I pull her into a sitting position where she just collapses on me, and with her head on my shoulder, I reach around her and start fumbling ignorantly with her bra. Just as I get it, my mom flings the bedroom door open and hits the overhead light. There I am, shirtless, in some kind of cross-straddle of my half-naked, drooling sister undoing her bra. Story 66. My roommate in college and I were best friends from high school. We had a lot of history, and although rooming in college strained that relationship, we still ended up as the best men in each other's weddings. One semester, we decided to watch all of Dragon Ball Z. We would watch around 3 to 5 episodes a night, and most nights, just one more, was said more than a few times. In one of the episodes where Vegeta was doing at least 1,000 handstand push-ups in 300 times Earth's gravity, we suddenly looked at each other and we said, if Vegeta can do 1,000 handstand push-ups in 300 times Earth's gravity, we can surely do one in normal gravity. Like I said, typically we would watch these at night, and we lived in the dorms, which was a one-room space on a hall with shared bathrooms. So we lived and breathed in a 10 by 10 space together. We often slept in only boxers. So we climbed out of bed in our underwear, and he starts trying to do a handstand up against a wardrobe in our room. He was struggling a bit, and I offered to hold his legs for him. He finally got up and was ready to start the push-up, and I said, wouldn't it be awkward if someone walked into our room right now? He begins the push-up and his legs fall into my arms so that it looks like I'm butt-effing him as he handstands. In walks another guy that lives on the hall. He makes eye contact with me, neither of us say a word, and he backs out and slowly closes the door. We die laughing, and we never really clarified with the other guy what was happening. We were also at a Bible college. Yikes. Yep, just another story of someone watching Dragon Ball Z and then wanting to train to become a Super Saiyan. I myself was guilty of this, as are thousands, tens of thousands of other DBZ fans out there, so no shame. Story 67. When I was 14, my mom and her BF lived in Brooklyn together. So in the same house was me, my 2 younger brothers, an older stepbrother, and a younger stepsister. As you can imagine, there wasn't exactly much privacy, especially for a boy going through puberty. So, to set the scene a little, my mom and stepdad had the premium channel package. So we had HBO, Showtime, et al. Knowing that these channels usually had not safe for work content late at night, they put a parental lock on the TV. No softcore adult content for lil G-Stormborn. But I found a way to get them to unlock the channels and not suspect what I was actually doing. Late at night, after the little ones went to bed, I would ask my mom or our dad to unblock the TV so I could watch a rated R movie. Once they unblocked it, I would start a movie and then wait until they were asleep, and I would surf the sections that HBO After Dark, etc. had to offer. 14-year-old me thought he was a master manipulator, and of course I bragged about it to my friends, LOL. So one night, at like 3 in the morning, I was watching some cheesy Skinamax movie and playing the old skin flute. Everything was good, but then my cat hopped up on the couch and was too close to my junk for comfort. So I was trying to get her off the couch. Mind you, my chicken is still erect and the adult content is still playing. I didn't realize that my stepdad had woken up and was coming to the living room for a smoke. He walked into the room to see me, hard as steel, with one hand on my chicken and the other nudging the cat away. Important to note that the way you entered the living room, you couldn't see the TV screen. Also important, I would have the volume offer very low as to not wake anyone up. My stepdad thought I was beating my one-eyed weasel to my cat. Before I could even try to explain what happened, he turned away and told me to never talk about this and went right back to bed. 14 years later, and this is the first time I've ever retold the story, and it was never brought up again. To this day, my mom's ex-boyfriend thinks I'm some weirdo that gets off to petting cats. Story 68. Growing up, my parents had a strict 1-hour time limit on basically anything powered by batteries. While in the midst of a long grounding, I decided to go and find my GBA and play it whenever I could manage. At the time, I had to share a room with my younger brother, so naturally we had bunk beds, as the room wasn't really big enough for two beds. On summer day, bored out of my skull, I decided to risk it and get some gaming in. Not a fool, I sat up under the covers and propped up my rather large Halo encyclopedia in front of me for shielding, and I was far enough away from my door that I had ample time to hide my contraband and pretend to read my book should anyone come a-knocking. This was summer, so it was hot outside, and one open window with no breeze will not keep you cool, especially if you're using blankets to disguise your illegal gaming session. I was sweaty. My dad barrels around the corner to ask me something and stops, saying, "Never mind," and rushing away nearly as quickly. I tried to act nonchalant, but he scared the crap out of me, and I looked extremely guilty of something. "Sorry, Dad, I wasn't actually pleasuring myself, just playing video games." Story 69. My eldest son has autism and was quite a handful at age 4. He got a full box of cereal and tipped it on the lounge room floor and spread it around, stomping on it. I walked in on him doing it and had told him off. That made him flip out, and he pushed a small shelf of stuff over, making a huge mess. I got mad and shouted at him, and he started screaming and hitting himself in the face, so I had to stop yelling and bear hug him to calm him down. So I'm there, crouching down, physically restraining a flailing, screaming child, when a woman appears at the front door, which I had just seen the screen door shut so she could see everything. Turns out, it's the lady from Child Services come to check on us, because we'd accessed some of their special needs services prior. I have to let go of my son to answer the door. He takes this chance to bolt for his bedroom. She steps into what looked like a cornflake bomb disaster zone, kindly ignores the mess and says she's just here for a routine visit to see how my son and daughter are doing. I reply, "Oh crap, the baby," and frantically look around for her before remembering I left her in her baby seat in the kitchen. Parent of the year right here. Spent the next few weeks worrying that Child Services would come and take my kids. Story 70. I was a tomboy when I was a child, always playing rough with neighborhood boys, riding bikes, jumping ramps, you name it. I also went to church with my parents regularly. One day I'd gone with my mom to the church. While she attended a meeting, I played and ran around the neighborhood with 2 other kids, both boys. I was wearing a new pink button-up shirt. Remember this fact. The meeting was going to last longer, so for some reason my dad was dispatched to come and get me and take me home. I saw him pull into the church parking lot, and I took off running and yelling, "Catch me if you can," to the boys. I ran up to my dad's car, and when he saw me, his face turned bright red, and I could tell he was angry. I started to say, "What's wrong, Dad?" And then I looked down at my shirt and was horrified to see that almost every button of the pink shirt had come undone. So here I am, running out from behind the church with my shirt unbuttoned. I knew immediately that my dad thought I'd let them see, or worse. I had already been in a little trouble because of boys. I was so embarrassed, and all my feeble attempts to explain what happened just made me look more guilty. Bonus story. When my eldest son was little, he loved swords. I took him to church on Sundays, and when things got boring for him, I'd give him paper and crayons. One Sunday, he was drawing swords on a piece of paper I brought. Church ended and people started leaving. A church elder walked by, stopped and said, "Oh my." I looked down at my son's drawing paper and saw his swords he'd drawn. They looked just like upside-down crosses. Imagine a child's drawing of a sword. Kind of like an upside-down lowercase t. He was innocent, but man, did it look like he was some sort of closet Satanist. And there's nothing wrong with being a Satanist. Story 71. Back in the 90s, while going to a very conservative Southern university, I had lots of friends in the LGBTQ community, and I went to their parties on a regular basis. One time I brought along an old high school friend, who until shortly before that point had been quite the homophobe. He'd recently had something of an epiphany, and a lot of his worldviews were full of crap, and maybe hardcore evangelical Christianity wasn't the answer for him. Anyways, we were trying to shout a conversation over the very loud music about his philosophical journey, and he was saying that he couldn't believe how kind and welcoming all the folks had been at the party, what a great time he was having, and that he was ashamed that just a few years prior, he'd have been so heartless to everyone there, probably saying something horrible like they were nothing but a bunch of F's and queers. But, of course, the music stopped at exactly the wrong time, so this very conservative-looking dude that nobody knew but me was shouting, "They're nothing but a bunch of F's and queers," to a suddenly quiet room full of folks who had to put up with that crap on a daily basis. I think I literally said, "This isn't what it looks like." Story 72. My wife and I attended a couple seminar weekend in the love languages about 9 months into our marriage. We were in our early 20s and way younger than any of the other couples there, and ended up befriending the girl who was there to take care of and entertain the kids of the other couples. She was a few years younger than us, and we sort of adopted her as a little sister. She had lived in Panama all her life, so we hung out with her very often, and she showed us around the city and country. My wife got pregnant a few months after the couple seminar, and when she was about 3 months pregnant, decided to fly back home to Texas to visit her family for about a month before she got too big and uncomfortable to travel. About a week after she left, we received an invitation to attend a formal event. I had decided not to attend, but my wife was not happy about that since formal events in the military are sort of mandatory fun events. It turned out our little sister was also invited. My wife convinced me that I should go with her since she didn't have a date. The night of the event, my little sister picked me up at my office and we went to the event, which was at another base. Since I was in my Class A uniform and it was a formal event, I offered her my arm, so we walked into the venue arm in arm. We saw a table with several of our friends from chapel, some of whom had been at the Love Languages seminar, and we walked over to sit with them. As we approached the table and some of the people seated noticed us, I saw several of them look startled, and several of the ladies looked upset. It was at this point that I realized here I was with a young, attractive, she was very attractive, but I had never really thought of her that way, girl, while my pregnant wife was away. I think it took most of the evening, and I'm sure for some of the people there even longer, for our friends to finally convince themselves that it was a completely innocent situation. Story 73. I have one for this. I was at a house party back in my teen years with a bunch of friends and my, at the time, girlfriend. I'd been dating her for a few months, and as teens are, hormones were very rampant, and her house was a no-go zone for adult play. I had previously been to her house, met her family, and they just did not like me at all, especially her older brother. Anyways, at this party, she buggers off a few times, comes back progressively more drunk, and to the point of not being able to articulate her point, as nobody could really understand her on their first try. She disappears again, so I go looking for her. Find her in the host's bedroom with a couple of other guys around watching her do whatever drunk task she was trying to accomplish. I suspect she was going to get sexual with them. Rumors arose out of her previous disappearances that night, but that's another story. I shoo off the onlookers and address the situation as best as I could. She was too drunk, and I needed to get the excess alcohol out of her body. She strips off, and I put her in the shower after vomit attempts end up all over her, and she's an absolute mess. She's crying and saying that she used to be bulimic and she doesn't want to go back to vomiting up her food. I assure her that this is different, and this will help her by us not having to contact the ambulance for stomach pump, etc. So shower ends, I've dried her off, and started putting her clothes back on. Top first, as she was rather adamant about being naked and kicking her legs. I get her top and skirt on, and as I'm trying to reef her underwear up, her half-dried legs, the door to the room opens, and her brother that hates me is standing there with the expression on his face like he wanted to kill me. I had to be that guy and reluctantly said, "It's not what it looks like," as from an outsider's perspective, it could look like I was attempting to take off her clothes with her resisting. Thankfully, she was still half wet from the shower, and I managed to talk my way out of a fight that I had no chance of winning. Her brother was sent by their mother to come and get her. Apparently, her mother could hear a party in the distance and knew she was going to stay at a friend's house, also knowing the friend and the location. Brother takes her home, and her mom beats the hell out of her for being a skank. I resumed drinking and had a great time. Story 74. When puberty hit, eczema came along for the ride in a big way. Anyone who suffers from eczema will tell you it's itchy as crap. Scratching only makes the rash worse, but goddamn, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. I got prescribed a fairly expensive cream, but I wouldn't stop scratching, which made the cream kind of redundant and ultimately a waste of money, which understandably annoyed my parents. So one night in bed, I'm sitting up, vigorously scratching my leg when Dad walks in. He sees me sitting up, my arm going up and down, and walks out immediately. Comes back a minute later with a box of tissues, tells me not to stain the sheets, and leaves again. I tried to clear it up with him the next day. He tells me he's not a effing idiot, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and let's leave it at that. Story 75. LOL. Not my biggest, but since it just happened yesterday, I was at my desk watching a comedy clip my buddy texted me. It was only a few minutes long, but it had me literally crying, like hysterically, but the kind of hysterical laugh/cry you do when you're trying to hold it in and hold it together so no one else hears you, which somehow makes you laugh and cry even harder. You know that point when you're finally wiping away your tears and just going, and trying to compose yourself and catch your breath? Right at that moment, my boss popped his head in to ask me a question. My face must have immediately gone to shock/horror, because when I looked up at him, face flushed, obviously just crying uncontrollably, his face suddenly went to shock and horror. He definitely thought I just got some terrible news. He immediately asked me if everything was okay, and since I was startled from being busted, I sort of just panicked and was like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything is fine. Then it was the back and forth. Are you sure you're okay? Do you need anything? With me, I promise, I'm okay. Everything is fine. I'm pretty sure he thinks someone in my family died, or I just found out I have an incurable disease, because for the rest of the day yesterday and all day today, he's been overly nice to me. Story 76. Oh man, slightly not safe for work story? I don't know. All I know is that this is still mortifying to think about, and it may be long. So I was a virgin until I met my now husband. He's the only man I've ever been with, and he was aware of that before we ever had sex. He knows he's the first and only. Now, before him, I had to get creative with pleasure methods. I didn't have a toy or anything, but a girl's gotta get it sometimes. Thus began the search for things that were phallus-shaped. Lo and behold, the only thing that was reasonably sized was a carrot. Now, I had a few condoms because the university I went to would frequently just hand them out in the quad for various reasons or events. Slap one on the carrot and, take care of myself, trash the carrot and the condom, go on about my day. Several months into our relationship, many months after my carrot companion, my love is helping me pack up because we're planning on moving in together. I have to work that day, so he drops me off and spends the afternoon at my place cleaning up and packing. At the time, I was a salesperson for an orthotics store. During summer, we hardly got customers because we were in an outdoor mall and people didn't want to deal with sweating as they shopped, so it was a slow day. But then, a customer. I launch into my spiel and try to work my magic. My phone rings and it's my love, but this is the first and possibly only customer I've had all day. I can't just pick up the phone and blow off the sale. I ignore it and do my thing. End up selling a $70 pair of shoes. Cool. After the customer leaves, I look at my phone and my love sent me a photo. I open it and it's a photo of the wrapper of the carrot condom and I immediately turn red. We don't use condoms. I had the implant. Must have missed the trash can, never been taken out, and just lived in an unseen corner in my room. In that moment, I didn't know what was worse, that he was probably jumping to conclusions the longer I didn't respond, or that I had to tell him the real story. Cue a few more minutes of me panicking because I do not want to have that embarrassing conversation. I had just started having sex. Conversations about sex were still awkward for me. I just bit the bullet and called him. I had to explain it's not what it looks like. Yes, it's a condom wrapper. No, it was not on anyone's chicken. It was, in fact, a carrot. Story 77. My younger sister wanted to meet my friend who she admired, as they both played women's sports and my friend was our school star. I didn't really want to introduce my sister because she was very pretty for her age, and my friend was not only a perv, but a lesbian as well. I made a deal with my sister that if she could withstand me brushing her teeth for 5 minutes, I would allow her to meet my friend. I had read earlier in the week some article about how someone else brushing your teeth is like torture. Wasn't sure if it was true, but I knew I would hate to have someone else brush my teeth, and I could not last 5 minutes of that. Well, things got weird. I began to brush her teeth, and somehow it pleasured her. She began moaning, and it seemed to be almost erotic. It was making me feel uncomfortable. I had never had someone else brush my teeth, so maybe it was a good feeling to try to calm her, but still win the bet. I wanted to make her uncomfortable. So while still brushing, I pinned her to the bed. She was struggling, but doing her best to win the bet, because she idolized my friend. It was at this moment my other sister walked in to see me pinning my sister down in pajamas, shoving something in her mouth while she erotically was moaning. Now, this was merely a struggle between two people who wanted to win a stupid bet very badly, but what it looked like was much worse. I was grounded for 6 months. Story 78. Boy, I hope I'm not late. I had moved into this apartment complex, which was like a resort. A few swimming pools, 5 gyms, tennis court, etc. for $2,500 a month. You could have access to all of it between 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and also live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the property. I was stoked because my office was half a mile away. I was in the process of showing off and taking pictures of the place. I went into the business area, which was 4 floors and included a conference room, a printing and computer stations, game room, club room, etc. I was in the printing room, which overlooked a massive swimming pool. I was taking pictures of the property, and I leaned in to take a picture of the pool from the window when the door opened and some girls walked in. All was fine, except the pool had just kids in it. Now, for someone just walking in with no context and no backstory, this looks like a creepy guy taking pics of kids in a pool. As soon as I realized this, after I saw the unmistakable "is this for real" look on their faces, I thought of a plan. I called the last number I had called and said, "Hey, did you get the pictures? I think we can do the event by this pool." I don't know if this was a good save or not, but it was certainly the best I could think of. I felt so weird for a whole day. Story 79. I space and zone out a lot, and have always had people commenting about me staring or glaring, or how it was creepy that I never blinked. But the worst was when I was in rehab. I'm a lesbian, and it was an all-women rehab for eating disorders, and we had to share rooms, and one night while we were changing, I was having a, as it turns out, one-sided discussion, because the other side didn't even realize I was speaking, and was spacing out during it, and got accused of staring at one of my roommates while she changed. It was frustrating because I wasn't even allowed to defend myself and had to confess to sexually violating her. And I mean, if she did feel violated, I wouldn't want anyone to feel that way, and it's bad that someone feels that way despite there being intent or no intent behind it, but in general, for the entire time I was there, even before that incident, I felt like I got a lot of crap because I was lesbian, and somehow this meant I was going to be some sex monster or something. Story 80. I was 14, and I'd saved my money to order a GoPro Hero 1, shortly after release. I got home from school one day, and the package was there. I was so excited to show my whole family my new toy. I played around with it and figured out how to record. However, the record button was hard to press, so I had some trouble with it. I went upstairs to my older sister's room first. She wasn't in her room, and someone had just rung the doorbell downstairs, so I left my GoPro on my sister's shelf as I ran downstairs to answer the door. It was a neighbor lady who wanted to talk to my mom, but my mom wasn't there. I told her I'd let my mom know she stopped by, and she left. It seemed like nobody was home, so I started playing SXX on tour on the PS2. I totally forgot that I'd left my GoPro in my sister's room. I forgot, that is, until my dad started yelling at me. At first I was confused. I had no idea what he was ranting and raving about. But then it hit me. Remember how I had trouble pressing the record button? Well, it turns out I'd left my GoPro recording, sitting on my sister's bedroom shelf, and she only noticed the blinking red light after she changed her clothes. They knew I was getting a GoPro, so she told my dad, thus the ranting and raving. He told me he wanted to kick my a-hole into my throat. I tried to explain, but they didn't buy it. The GoPro was taken away for a week, and no amount of explaining could convince either my dad or sister that I wasn't intentionally trying to record my sister naked. Story 81. This was at the office. I was expecting a phone call, so I stopped by a reception and told the receptionist, we'll call her Lisa, that I would be in the bathroom and if she could take a message. I let her know I would tell her when I was out if the call hadn't come through yet. I was now using the bathroom, sitting down, and after browsing on my phone for a little too long, I finished my business, exited the toilet stall, and proceeded to wash my hands. After I opened the door, I stopped to check that I put my cell phone in my pocket, but I found a mini Reese's peanut butter cup I had grabbed from the reception desk earlier, maybe 2 hours previously, in the day, and forgot about until just now. In the bathroom doorway, holding the door with my butt, I opened the cup wrapper and it was all melted and got all over my hands. I dropped the wrapper in the bathroom trash can, let go of the door by just walking away, and I began licking my fingers to clean all the chocolate and peanut butter muck that had stuck to my fingers. The receptionist walked around the corner just in time to see me walking away from the bathroom licking dark matter off my fingers, and gave me the strangest look. Yeah, let this be a lesson. Just use a napkin. Don't lick your fingers. That's gross. Story 82. This was in high school. Me and my high school girlfriend were both 15 at the time. I was sneaking over. It was the end of spring/early summer. This is important to the plot. And our genius idea was simple. Her parents would go out to smoke while her brothers were at the park, and I would sneak in through the front door and go upstairs to her room. Before I'm berated for this, yes, it was very poorly planned, but also yes, we had successfully done this before, so we figured it might work again. I get inside, no problem. Score. I get upstairs and we talk for a minute in her room. Everything is good, except my neck is a bit itchy. I find out I had a tick on me. No thanks. I start undressing to check for more. As I'm undressing, her parents see me through the window. Yes. Apparently the blinds were flipped in such a way that you can peer in from downstairs and outside. They just see me undressing. They knock on her door. She locked her door often for privacy, and I hid under the bed. As soon as the door opens, we hear, "Where the F is he?" Silence. I'm silent because I'm in shock and near crapping my pants in that moment. Please kill me now. Hiding is futile, but I lay silently, as I really don't know what to do anymore. They found me. We were in deep crap. They thought we were banging, but really, ticks. Not to say we hadn't before, which opened up a whole new can of worms because they thought we were both virgins, though we were each other's first. Last we talked about it, maybe 7 years following this incident, her parents still don't believe the tick thing. It's funny as hell now, but back then, in that moment, my life felt over. Story 83. I once had a long-term girlfriend named Sarah, name changed to protect identity. We dated for 3 years and broke up. Shortly after, she got a DWI and I loaned her $500 for a lawyer. I didn't expect to get the money back soon, but I wanted it eventually, so I'd text and ask if she had it every 6 months or so. A couple years later, I was dating, short-term, a different girl named Sarah. After a few months, I broke it off and she was pissed. So later that night, I get a call from a guy. He says, "Yo, you been screwing my girlfriend?" I told him I didn't know who his girlfriend was. He said, "Sarah." I said, "Wow, I'm really sorry, man. I had no idea she had a boyfriend. Honestly, I don't even know how you two had time for each other. I've been with her every day for the last several months." We hung up and I pondered how the hell she had a boyfriend and why she would have told him about me after I broke it off. A few minutes later, I get a call from Sarah number 1, asking why I told her boyfriend we were having sex. Turns out her boyfriend had seen a recent text asking her if she had that $500, just assumed we were hooking up, and called to confront me about it. I tried to call the dude back and explain the situation, but he was in a jealousy-fueled rage and wasn't buying it. Story 84. Not me, but one of my favorite stories about my dad. My parents lived near a national park, with one of the streets near them ending in a track that goes out into the bush. So one evening, we're heading out to a friend's house for a barbecue, and a wallaby jumped out in front of our car. It actually hit our car and ended up on the other side of the road, where it was hit by another car coming the other way. So all the cars stop and jump out to check on this wallaby that's somehow still clinging to life on the side of the road, but was clearly not long for this world. The lady from the other car that hit the wallaby starts getting really upset, going on and on about how someone needed to take it to the vet. Meanwhile, my dad and another guy who stopped were looking at this wallaby, knowing there was no way it was going to make it to the vet. Eventually, to shut the lady up, Dad told her that he would take the wallaby to the vet and that everyone else could leave and he would take care of it. By this point, the wallaby had shuffled off this mortal coil and the lady hadn't even noticed. So everybody left, including us. We had a barbecue to get to, leaving my dad to take care of this dead wallaby. So Dad goes home, we were just around the corner, and grabs some big heavy-duty garbage bags and goes back to the wallaby. He wraps it up so he can put it in the car, thinking he'll take it out to the national park and leave it there. I think you can see where this is going. Dad drove to the end of the street to the bush track, pulls out a body wrapped in garbage bags and starts walking into the bush when headlights appear behind him. It was easily explained, but I can't imagine how freaked out those people must have been seeing him walk out into the bush in the middle of the night with a body wrapped in garbage bags. Story 85. Went to a conference for continuing education out of state. My husband traveled with me, but rather than stay in a boring hotel room for 4 days while I attended lectures and events for 10 to 12 hours a day, he was going to stay with some friends and family that lived about an hour away. He was going to just drop me off at the hotel so I could get to event registration right away, but he needed to use the bathroom. So he asked me if he could come up to the room with me before he left. Of course, that was fine with me. I get checked in, get my key, and we go up to the room. We open the door and go in to find the room is obviously occupied. What are clearly a man's clothing is in an open suitcase, some very nice boxers on top, plus a robe and shaving items, etc. We look around, look at each other, and my husband says to me, "Oh, I guess I should leave before your friend gets back to the room." We laughed a bit over the situation and went back to the front desk. They had some kind of computer issue that had been resulting in assigning multiple guests to the same rooms. I know my husband trusts me, but there was definitely a moment of, "Oh crap, this looks bad," when we first walked in. Story 86. My boss was having serious problems with a sketchy anti-surge power bar attached under his desk. As I had had this same issue, I was telling him an easy taping fix that would stop his leg/thigh from tripping the reset switch on the supply. He was getting flustered that he couldn't reach the switch, he's a bigger man, so he asked me if I could just tape it in place. I grabbed the tape and went under his desk. As I affixed the tape, I accidentally hit the power switch, causing a power cut to his desktop and crap he was working on. At that moment, a couple coworkers walked into his office with the VP and district manager, who came by with some swag and coffee from the promotions campaign they were kicking off. My boss was leaning way back in his chair, hands behind his head. He yells, "F me, I wasn't done yet." I come up, neaten my clothes that got bunched up while crouching down, and say, "Sorry, next time I'll be more careful." We both look at the crowd in front of the door. VP looks at me and I say, "I accidentally powered down his unit." More awkwardness, then some wry smiles. Story 87. A friend had invited a group of us to have drinks for his birthday at this favorite gay bar. It was a basement cocktail place that was super cozy and always busy. It was early in the night, but a mate had a bit of nose candy to go around, so me and him went off to find the bathrooms. There were two really small bathrooms. One was being used, and the other had somehow managed to fit both a urinal, toilet, and a sink into a space that would struggle to fit two people. What this meant for us is that one guy stood by the urinal, while the other laid his rails out on the cistern whilst kneeling on top of the toilet lid. My mate went first, crushed his lines, and then we did a shimmy to swap places. As I was halfway through mine, he decides to use the urinal. Just as he's shaking off and I'm still face down, ass up on a rail, the toilet door opens and a well-manicured man's eyes open in amazement, and he simply says, "Well, boys, it's a bit early for that, isn't it?" We realize that I'm kneeling on the toilet lid and obscuring the view of our actual activity, while my mate has his chicken out and is fumbling to pull it back into his jeans. Realizing what this could look like, my mate decides to announce, "It's not what it looks like. We're doing drugs, not bumming." If I hadn't hoovered up that last line in a rush, I'd have probably blown it off the tank with the snort that came out of me. Luckily for us, the guy who'd walked in on us thought it was hilarious and was a friend of the birthday boy anyway. Moral of the story: lock the toilet door when you're doing drugs. Story 88. I was 14 and loved to game on the PC after a hard day at high school. What better way to enjoy a PC than by taking your pants off? I liked to game, but sometimes played too much and would get in trouble. Anyway, I sneak in, pantless, playing RuneScape, and my dad walks in. I quickly tab out into an empty desktop. Amateur. He asks what I'm doing. I say nothing, and he keeps looking to the side of my desk. My mom left her magazine with a girl on it. I see him looking at it. My pants are on the ground next to me, nothing is on the computer. I realize what he's thinking, and just let him keep thinking. Feels sorta awkward. He sorta goes, "Okay, don't waste time." Finally leaves, and I tab back in to get back to hunting chickens.